Fascinating.
Hello there and welcome to this tutorial, Basic Widget Simple Logo Overlay. So to add a widget, we can come here to the left hand side and go to User Interface and add a widget blueprint. So we'll call that Static Logo Boxed in this instance, as that's the project. And I'll double click into the widget designer. Now, there's all sorts of screen sizes here on the top left-hand side if you want a fixed size. Otherwise, it's kind of responsive based on where you position things in relation to anchor points. I know that I'm working to a fixed screen, so I will select a 1080 screen. Lovely. And then I will add an image, which I'm just going to do a static image bang in the middle of the screen as somebody presses play or the game starts effectively. So you'll note immediately as soon as I put that asset down, there's an anchor point in relation to that asset, and I can change that at any point. So I'm going to make that centered. And now any of these position references are relative to that central position. So I know the image size that I want is 650 pixels by 650, and that if I offset that by half, which is -325 by -325, it will be in the middle. Okay, so that's just a white brush at the moment, but I'm going to add an image that I've imported and tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So boxed for HUD. So let's have a look at that image. So I've imported that as a PNG that I've exported from Photoshop, and you'll see when it's in the content browser, it's completely white. Now, one thing to note is if you change here under level of detail to UI, then you won't have any compression settings on that at all. There is some translucent information there, as you can see. And you'll also note that the graphic is white. Now, I make all my graphics white because that then means I can tint them any color. If the source graphic is black, then you can't tint it because you're effectively trying to tint black and it's already saturated with every other color. So as a habit, I just make things white. So if we now come back to our HUD, that's in place, and we come back to our map. So as you know, if you watch some of my other videos, I tend to set up a setup actor rather than use the level blueprint. So in here, I can now trigger to add my widget to the viewport on begin play. So how do we do that? So we first of all get a create widget node, choose the widget we just created. Now, if we want to reference that widget or any part of that widget at a later date within the setup actor, then it's worth promoting that to a variable so you've always got access to it. So I'm just going to call that hub for the purpose of this, and then we can add to viewport. So that will create the widget, save it locally as a variable, and then add it to the viewport. Now the viewport acts as the parent of the widget. So for example, sometimes you'll see or you'll need to get the HUD and remove from parent. That in effect takes it off the screen. It removes it and deletes it ultimately. So that's the way of kind of adding it and removing it. Now, when the widget is on the screen, you want to possibly give the user a different interaction state. So during this widget, we're going to allow the user to have the mouse on screen. So we get the player controller, just right click player controller, and then we make sure that that is then the target into the show mouse cursor. So that will now appear on screen, and also be interacting with the game. So here the set input mode is game and UI. So it will interact with the widget and the world. Now you can prioritize or switch out what you do and do not want the user to do depending on different conditions. So you do have kind of individual control as well. So you can just come out of a widget and then only give a user game control, or the other extreme, only widget control. So let's have a look now. So when we press play, here's our widget. It's come onto our viewport, and we have our mouse. So I can interact with the world behind. And because I haven't added any interaction yet to the image, there's no kind of click through or anything. The next video we'll create is how we can create this as an interactive button so that we enter the experience. One thing just to note is that within my setup, I've also got a post-process component, which is stylizing the world. So if I come down and disable that, you'll see actually we are dealing with a kind of really good quality materials and good geometry and everything. But from a kind of graphic design, stylized point of view, I wanted to create this slightly sort of low contrast black and white look from the outset. So what we'll do is when we click the button on the next video, we will enter the experience, but also go back to a kind of real world rendering of that. So let's move on.
Live long and prosper.